Hello, gorgeous pagan people. My name is Eric, and I'm substituting for Megan this Thursday here on the Pagan Perspective. This week we have a very timely team member topic. This was worded by Kara. The full text, of course, is in the description as always. But she says, "We have talked about racism in pagan communities in the past, as well as specific justice topics people have suggested. This week being both a time when the world is protesting systemic oppression against Black, Indigenous people of color, and the first week of Pride Month in the US. What are our views on social justice and standing against oppression of all kinds? How do we incorporate justice into our paths? If we are new to these issues, how are we going about educating ourselves? Are there any resources we recommend?" Now, this is a huge topic, and I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really nervous making this video. I think that my first response in regards to this topic and in regards to the current state of affairs, and as Kara says, global. These protests are global. We're seeing them here in Australia, in New Zealand, in the US, in Canada, through Ireland and Denmark and Norway. These protests, I think as well, while we're still in the midst of COVID-19, it's really articulated that, we are a global community, and we've seen from the government here in Australia that, we shouldn't import abroad issues when we're protesting here. And I think that really flies in the face of everything that we are still going through with COVID-19. And, this recognition of this, humanity being a global community. But of course, I totally recognize that, because of my whiteness, I have a certain privilege. And as part of Kara's question says, what if we're new to these issues, how are we educating ourselves? And I think, for me, there is that response of, I don't know enough about this, I won't say anything, I'll just stay quiet. But something that I've heard recently is that we don't have time for white people to find their voices. And so I think that that's, something that was really powerful for me and really moving. And so, I don't know all the ins and outs of these issues, and especially as I start to learn how to move in a traditional African religion, it's something I'm learning more about all the time. Kara mentioned in her book, in her video, the book How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. I've ordered that book. So I think as well that because I live in Australia, and so much of this has been, the catalyst for this has been events that have occurred in the States, the murder that's occurred in the States. And so it's very hard for me to feel like I have a right to talk about these things. But I think that it's necessary to speak about these things, and, I don't want to sound like some sort of white savior, but if we have privilege and platform, I think it's important that we use that. And as well, companies who have brand power, using that to elevate these other voices. But in relation to social justice broadly and how it relates to my path, here in Brisbane, our magical community, our witchcraft scene is very reclaiming tradition heavy. It's really the only tradition that's well represented here in Brisbane. So my exposure to the witchy community, the conversations that I've had, witchcraft has always been described as something that is transgressive. There was conversations about how it was the village witch who lived on the outskirts and was shunned from society. That's who we were embodying. and how like magic was a tool of the marginalized, and it was what people used when they had no other resources. Uh, so this conversation about social justice has always been intrinsically tied to witchcraft, um, and I guess like by extension then my movement into voodoo. In the past, I've tried to be involved in uh, social justice causes that have called to me, or that I felt, uh, engaged with. I marched for marriage equality on a number of times, and I've protested to deplatform bigotry. So I've definitely been engaged in this kind of work, and I definitely see it as tied into spirituality for me, and um, even incorporating magic and chanting and things during protest marches. I think that those things were always like tied together for me, and even now with everything that's going on, I'm researching for different charities and things that I can donate to. I think that ultimately, as long as we live in a capitalist society, we really need to speak with our wallet. Like that's our strongest tool. So I will definitely be donating. I'm still trying to figure out if I should do smaller amounts to multiple places, or a larger sum to one place. So if you have any thoughts on that conversation, like definitely leave comments, like on any of these conversations, like leave your comments and your voices. I think as well that for me, until recently, I had a brick and mortar store, which I only had for about 6 months due to COVID-19. But even then, like a lot of the work that I was doing there was about elevating people of color and disabled people and queer people, and trying to elevate them within the community and to give them a space, and to encourage them in their work. I think that for me, my activism has never been online, and this is a really interesting time for me, because sharing memes is never something that I've felt helps at all for me to do. And maybe I'm wrong in that, but I've always just looked for ways that I can engage in conversations with, bigoted family members, or a lot of the friends that I'm having conversations with at the moment haven't really heard about what's going on in the States. They're completely oblivious to it, and so I'm engaging in those conversations, and I think that work, I don't know, I guess using social media as a platform is wonderful, I suppose. It's just not, I guess, something that I personally understand or place much value in, I suppose. So it's interesting to me now, because I feel like I am being judged on how my activism is being present on social media. So I don't, but as well, I don't want to just come on here and just virtue signal at you guys and being look at all this work that I'm doing, aren't I such a wonderful white person? I get how tone deaf that sounds. I think that we do a lot of harm when we equate the queer experience with the black experience, just because they're both groups of minorities. But throughout all of this, there is something that these minorities keep echoing. There is a documentary here on YouTube about ACT UP, which was a protest movement in the 80s. Gosh, okay, sorry. ACT UP protest movement in the 80s. I'll try to leave the documentary in the description below. But there is a clip from one of these protests that took place inside a church. And there is a young man standing in the church, and he is shouting, "Stop killing us." And when we see the deaths of trans women and trans women of color, Malaysia Brooke just last year, Malaysia Booker, just last year, that community too echoes, "Stop killing us." And throughout these protests in the US, another chant that I see echoed is stop killing us. And that's something that's really hard to grapple with, I think. So yes, I will endeavour to continue to educate myself, both on the black history and the queer history that the world forgot to mention. And I will continue to speak with my wallet and try to use my voice to elevate others. Yeah, this was a really heavy topic to make a video on, and I hope that I in some way did it justice, but I definitely recognize my own ignorance on a lot of these conversations. So I just hope, if nothing else, that you can see the honesty and sincerity with where I'm coming from in this video. But until I speak to you next time, I hope that you all stay well and stay safe. Be well.